Okay. So, obviously, the title of this week's paper was You Are What You Eat, but You Eat What You Are: The Role of Identity in Eating Behaviors, a Scoping Review. So, firstly, as the introduction, identity is a major construct in the fields of psychology and anthropology that may be relevant to eating behaviors. There are generally two main theories. One is called the identity theory, and the other one is called the social identity theory. According to the identity theory, identities are evolving and multifold. For instance, an individual may be simultaneously a mother, a software developer, a vegetarian, and a recent immigrant, and each of these identities will have a range of internal motivations, values, and goals. Identity theory aims to assess how an individual's multiple identities interrelate and how they may vary in centrality and in salience by context. For example, individuals may shift among components of their identity, thinking and acting somewhat differently depending on whether they are at work or with family, and identities may also shift and change in response to more profound changes in context, for example, developing a major illness or immigrating to a new country. The social identity theory, a second major psychological theory of identity, aims to understand. Oh, yeah, Melissa?
What is salience? I read it several times and I
It's
never
like
understood it.
It's like meaningful, or yeah, in German would be like Bedeutung, or I don't know what it was in, yeah, meaning, I guess. Yeah. Or unless someone can correct me of the native speakers. Um, but yes. So social identity theory aims to understand identity as a social construct that develops from group membership and social affiliations. Social identity theory examines the role that identification with a group or in grouping plays in the reinforcement of behavior, as well as the anticipation or fear of judgment for failing to behave congruently with the group. In the realm of health behavior theory, there has been increasing interest in including, most notably in the theory of planned behavior. Self-identity was first introduced in the theory of planned behavior to help account for the salience of internal values as a predictor of intention. As such, it is thought to help understand and predict differences in the intentions to perform and sustain behavior based on how important the behavior is to the way someone describes themselves. In anthropology, food is considered a central part of identity formation. How food is chosen, made, served, and eaten all serve to co-construct identities of multiple orders: self-identity, family identity, ethnic identity, national identity, religious, and others. Food choices signal active allegiances with social groups and reinforce norms, stereotypes, and beliefs, and they do so multiple times a day throughout an individual's lifespan. Changes in eating behavior require individuals to make efforts to change their habits, maintain the change, and perform continual decision-making relevant to that change. This scoping review aims to understand and describe existing research relating identity to eating behaviors and to detail the measurement of identity. So in the scoping review, they included 100 articles examining 10 different identities, 8 identity constructs, 11 eating behaviors, and construct contributions from 26 theories. They rated articles based on the depth, complexity, and multi-dimensionality of the identity measurement in the study on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 would signal that there was little direct measurement of identity, little to no detailed reporting of identity in results, but discussion indicates the significance of identity to participants or to study findings, or if it is a topic offered by a subject in a qualitative setting rather than a measure derived from a study instrument. 5, on the other hand, would mean a strong, in-depth evaluation of identity, including multiple types of identity. These articles omit only one or fewer of the above-mentioned domains, or may look at these domains in a singular way, such as only asking about change in self-report rather than measuring a change compared to a baseline or identity process, and identification types without measuring strength or magnitude. So here we can see sort of an overview of all the studies. If there was an intervention or if it was only observational, the majority of them were observational in nature. Most of them were only one-time observations, and so that's kind of a bit of a downfall, I guess, when it comes to um, population, most of which actually just examined or had more women present in the study. And then on the right side, the more interesting thing I think is what characteristics they looked at. So 33 of them looked at healthy eating and whatever they classified that as. Um, Dieting for weight loss, or they classified vegetarian or meat reduction as healthy eating, etc. So it said many studies explored eating behaviors broadly as healthy eating. At times, this was evaluated using food records, diet assessments, and quality indices and quality scored food frequency assessments. Yeah, I think that's quite tricky because, as we all know, healthy eating and healthy eating are two different things. A lot of people say they eat healthy, and it's like a little bit of whole wheat bread and maybe I don't even know, a slice of ham on that and a leaf of salad, and that's a healthy meal. But they did what they could, and also we know that food records or food frequency or food, what are they called, recall assessments, they're super inaccurate as well. So, and also we know healthy eating doesn't necessarily indicate quantity or calorie excess or anything like that, but it is what it is. That's what they looked at. That's the studies that they chose to include. And so the most common type of identity was one that was created for the behavior in question, structured similarly to I think of myself as a healthy eater, or eating less junk food is important to me, or I am the type of person who watches what I eat. Um, so they some other characteristics mentioned in the studies were cultural identity, or like what kind of self-concept do you have, that kind of stuff, and not so much about family identity or ethnic identity, really. And then they also classified what identity theory was mentioned in whichever study. And so for the result in all studies evaluating the direct relationship between eating behaviors and identity, a significant relationship was observed. These relationships included the influence of strength of identity, identity salience, identity formation, reciprocal reinforcement between eating behaviors and identity change, healthy diet adoption, intent to change or maintain eating behaviors, excuse me, and adhere to dietary changes over time. Identity predicted individual sensitivity to social and subjective norms and to medical advice related to eating behaviors, as well as resilience to adverse life events or routine interruptions. Furthermore, in 15 studies, interventions to increase identity strength and salience improved self-concept, self-efficacy, perceived power, and adherence to short-term dietary changes that yielded improved clinical outcomes. One study found that a higher degree of social identity motivation, so motivations related to social identity such as conformity or social norms, was associated with both a lower strictness to diet adherence and a tendency to over-report adherence. I think that's quite interesting. Expanding on this, other articles discovered that stronger social identity was associated with adherence, except when the social influences are themselves the barrier, such as in the case of peer pressure or deviation from group norms. So I think because that is obviously conflicting in statement, but I think what that's simply saying is that the group in which you are. So either is helpful or is a bird or an obstacle when it comes to eating behavior or whatever adherence essentially. So let's just say you want to adhere to a healthy diet, but your group or most of the people in your circle eat unhealthily. So obviously, in that case, it's going to be harder for you to adhere. Whereas if you're in a group where everybody else like is, eating quite well or whatever, it's going to be super easy. So, I mean, it's logical, but it's kind of stated really difficult in my opinion. Or it sounds more difficult than what it needs to be, I think. At least that's how I understood it. Many of the articles treated identity as the source of motivation to change eating behaviors, wherein motivation was derived from the pervasive internal need for identity congruence. In conclusion, there is a need to increase the dimensionality and standardize the evaluation of identity in order to fully understand its explanatory power for eating behaviors and healthy eating behavior changes. Identity measurements seldom accounted for complexities such as multiple identities and identity shifting over time. Nonetheless, our findings indicate that multiple aspects of identity reciprocally reinforce behavior and that change maintenance is associated with identity salience and centrality. Identity is underutilized and heterogeneously applied in eating behavior research. The inclusion of identity assessments may lead to better outcomes being obtained within differing cultural, normative, and environmental scenarios. Future research is needed to establish more robust measures of identity. Intervention studies to establish the role of identity in promoting long-term changes in eating behaviors are also warranted. So I know, especially like Joyce, you always say like, what does that actually mean? They don't give us any, what do we do with that kind of thing, right? I mean, and I really like that way of thinking, like, what does that actually tell us? Because it's obviously a scoping review, so they're just looking at what evidence is there. But what it tells me is we all have certain identities. So I'll give you an example also when I was just thinking about competing in bodybuilding last year, I could feel within me that there was a big um, like a clash essentially of who I am and who I want to be and who I believe to be, and what role or identity I would have to step into in order to make that come true. So, for instance, I believe of myself that I'm someone I'm a traveler for one. I like to experience different foods. I That doesn't work with a bodybuilding diet, first of all. I'm someone I like to preach the message of, hey, you can have everything in moderation. You don't need to restrict everything. That is my message as a brand, as a company, as who I want to stand for. That's conflicting with me being a bodybuilder. I like to say, oh, you don't need to go into super severe calorie deficits. You don't need to add tons of cardio, or maybe you don't even need any cardio in order to achieve your goals. That conflicted with wanting to step on the stage. So I was like wrestling with myself for a while until I made the decision I'm not going to do it. It took me several months, but many people um they might not even feel that conflicting thing within them before they make a decision. And they just say, hey, I'm going to try that, or I'm going to try a diet. And they don't think of the person that they want to become. That's why we always say, think of the person that you need to become. That's what this essentially says here. And also think of how can you even make that work with your current beliefs, or how can you change that? So for instance, when I was reading that, especially when it was going over the various identities, Melissa, I thought of you because you have so many clear various identities as well. You said you're a vegetarian slash vegan. You are a foodie. You love food. You love preparing different
I
recipes.
actually drew it once.
You just
Remember that I sent you what that drawing because I was
right, yeah,
thinking
your
about it,
identities.
and I drew because I felt one day that I was a bit split, and it was like I am many things, and some of these things are a bit like opposite, like being a
Exactly.
scientist and advocating for animal experiments because we need them, but being a vegetarian and also
Right.
not eating meat because of animal welfare, and sometimes they clash.
Exactly, for sure. And so like I mean you have all these beautiful things, and I can imagine, especially also with your family, them not actually liking the food that you cook, and like many people that are not as self-aware as we are, perhaps, they really struggle with that. So maybe they are in their eating setting, and like they have a communal eating. Let's just say they're Indian and whatever, they all eat together. And then you, as a nutrition coach, you tell them, okay, from now on, no more coconut cream or ghee or butter with any of your cooking. And you can't have any of your rice because that's going to spike your insulin and blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, I need to lose weight. And then they do that for 6 weeks, and then it conflicts with all of their identities. Maybe they're a mother and a caretaker, and they love cooking and bringing people together, and they're not going to for a long time say, oh yeah, while you guys eat, I'm just going to sit here by the side and have my chicken and broccoli or whatever. Like it doesn't work. So um I like that it's just, basically confirming that oftentimes we should address with our clients, and that's what I'm taking from this article anyway, that talking about various identities or trying to get a feel for their identities, because of course you're not going to be like, oh, here's your intake form, tell me all your identities, and they're like, what? But over time you get a feel for who they are, for who they believe to be, and also how you can change that. As a nutrition coach, is most noticeable, I think, in regards to weekend behavior, or even just in regards to how they talk about themselves. So let's just say um something that I've heard many times is like, oh yeah, well, in my family we're just all big boned, or in my family they all eat a lot, or whatever. That's a belief. That's what that's an identity. Or if someone especially in English, or in, I don't know if it's in the UK as well, but in the States they often call people like big guy. That's big guy, whatever. And so from whenever this person was an adolescent, just because they might have been a little bit bigger, they had the nickname Big Guy. So that they're obviously known for someone who can eat a lot, and getting that person to lose weight and keep it off. Or like in Mexico or Colombia, they call gordo so many people. They're like, oh, gordo, gordo. And then all of a sudden, you're trying to get that.
Gordita,
You were called gordita. No way.
gordita. Yeah.
Oh, I can't believe it. Okay, you're not
So
any,
my mom would call me as it's not a pet name, it's
yeah, like a nickname or whatever.
like a nickname. Gorda, ven, gordita,
Oh,
ven.
yeah,
Gorda, negrita, chaparra. So they call you because you're short. So they call me
yeah.
short, fatty, and sweetheart all together. And
Well,
that
that
is
I
considered
have a
normal.
serious issue with that. Like my alarm bells just ring with that, because that manifests as an identity as well, and then changing that over time is really difficult. And I mean, some people, they keep that nickname even when they do lose weight, but essentially it's something like, oh, I'm known for eating a lot type of thing. Okay, so you're stepping into that, and that's often a not necessarily in regards to the nickname, but many people do say, oh, I'm known for eating a lot. I'm known to have 3 or 4 helpings of this and that or whatever. And so changing that over time is really difficult. And I,
Also, Lisa, because the amount of helpings that you have of something tells that person that cooked it how much you love her and love what she cooked,
of
which is
course,
what I feel when I cook something and no one eats it at
yes.
home. Then I feel this lack of connection. So when you are in our countries and you ask for seconds, that person feels loved,
Yes.
successful, and says, I managed to make her eat more, and that's
Mm-hmm.
good, that's
Mm-hmm. Of
positive. So this is part of our identity, and these behaviors do not lead to healthy weight. And I
Absolutely.
found the paper really interesting because we need to take this in account. Otherwise, the change
100%.
cannot happen because you will still be in that environment and you will still need to fit into that family and into this identity.
Yep.
And it's our work as coaches to find the way to get healthy behaviors incorporated into that identity. And that can be really tough. You asked me about a Spanish person the other day. Oh, damn it, it is really hard
Uh,
because culturally speaking, they eat out a lot, and that's part of their identity as a country.
they eat out a lot and also they share a lot, and that's a beautiful thing, but that's also, you can't say to that person, oh, just, you choose your own steak and potato and whatever, and they're like,
You can't.
what?
You
Yeah,
really,
exactly, you can't.
it is impossible, and you cannot track it because you get a full plate in the center of the table, and everybody with one fork pinches from the center of the table. So how do you calculate how much you ate?
Yeah.
And the
I,
salad comes already with the dressing, so it's just literally impossible.
It's very difficult. I see that with the Arabian cultures as well. It's super, super difficult when they have all their mese and sharing. Like it's beautiful, but yeah, it's not I would encourage you to rephrase that as like, okay, maybe the tracking is impossible, but still how can we find strategies with the clients to work
Oh,
around
that yes,
it?
but you
So
need to
like
find
how can
another
you
way
re
because
rearrange
tracking
the No,
tracking
no, I
is
mean,
there's no way.
yeah, especially
But
if you're a beginner or new at that, and you can kind of like after a while you can maybe like estimate a little bit for yourself, but nonetheless, like it's more about how do you work around that, because as you say, it's a part of their identity, it's a part of their culture, and so maybe like learning, okay, I don't need to engage, or maybe I can see that I limit that social eating to like twice a week if I'm in a dieting phase or so. And the other times I see that I meet my friends for a walk, or like that's what one of the first things that I encourage one of
they
my
don't walk.
yeah, one at the moment they don't, but that doesn't
Ah,
mean
but
they
they could.
can't. And
Okay, yeah,
so
yeah.
even like one of my first clients in Dubai, to this day, she says to me she almost only has catch up with friends when she goes for a walk with them now, and she's eternally grateful for even just suggesting that. For me, it seemed like such a tiny thing. I said that in like a side sentence once, oh, why don't you go for a walking date instead of having, your whatever other ketchup over food and gorging yourself there. And to this day, she does that with almost everybody, and it was like one of the biggest changes to her life. And so, just because it doesn't mean that it can't change, but we need to take things into consideration for sure. And yeah, I did find it super interesting. I heard in a podcast, and I think I've shared this podcast before with on Huberman. Lane Norton was on there, and he spoke about his friend, what's his name? Who was really Ethan Suplee, who was like over 500 pounds heavy, and he lost over 300 of those pounds or whatever. And every day he says to himself, after or when he goes into the gym or after the gym, I killed my clone today, because he still has that old identity that's like by now in the way back of his mind, that old person that used to do like have a completely different eating behavior, but now he's a new person, but he had to create that new person. And I mean, they also say the easiest way to change a habit or to make a habit change long term is to seek out the environment in which your desired behavior is the norm, right? But it's not so easy. We can't just suddenly change our family environment, our friend environment, all of our environments, but it is about taking those into consideration and seeing where can we still make changes. Like at home, can we talk to our spouse and say, instead of having the cookies on the counter, can we put out a fruit bowl, and can we stop eating in front of the TV and maybe having family dinners at the table, and like small changes. But yeah, as coaches, certainly taking all of that into consideration. But yeah, before I continue my half monologue here, what were your guys' thoughts on this paper?
I pretty much took similar things from that you took away, Lisa, in the sense that, identity was found to be important, but there isn't enough research for them to define like good measurements for it almost. Like I think they found like studies are measuring it, but it's kind of mixed, if that makes sense. I think they found, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me like the measurements still need, the way that they measure identity needs to be improved. And yeah, like we've got a snapshot of things, but ultimately more long-term stuff needs to be done, and more implementable intervention-based studies need to be done as well. They know it's important, but they don't know enough about it, essentially, is what I got from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I would probably say also, that there was a clear link visible between eating behavior and identity. But I mean, I don't think that this scoping review was aimed to provide a solution or even just suggestions for a solution. They really just wanted to see how much does that matter or does it matter as what we believe ourselves to be. So yeah, but I agree. I think that's what they kind of showed. Tom, any thoughts on your side?
I'll be honest. I found the paper really just so bland and
Fair
long-winded
enough.
that I really struggled to really get through it. I did read it all, but yeah, as I was going through the discussion, it just constantly felt like they were spending a long time trying to say something that feels quite obvious. But as you sort of eloquently said, I suppose it seems obvious to those of us who are in that space and are sort of reflective and think about this a lot. But yeah, it ties into my own beliefs as well. So I've got a bit of confirmation bias, I suppose. I can't remember who said it, where I heard it, but someone pointed it out to me anyway, and they literally just said, part of the difficulty with changing lifestyle habits, whether that's weight, diet, whatever it is that you have to take on a new identity in order to affect long lasting and significant change. If it's something mild, obviously that you don't necessarily have to do that, but you know, yeah, if you're overweight and you're going to try and lose weight and you've been overweight for a long time, you're probably going to have to change your identity, not just the way that you see yourself, but the way that other people see you. Probably it means that the people around you, they're going to have to change, or you're going to have to change the people around you, or the way that you interact with them. You've got to change your environment, etc. Same for putting on weight. Same for becoming a vegan or a carnivore or whatever it might be. And yeah,
Yeah, I
I've been
think
struggling with it for a while though, because it just makes it much. It seems much bigger when you think of it that way.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, but I mean, like honestly, you've probably and correct me if I'm assuming or wrong with this, but you've probably
I have.
experienced that in a small way, even just with the bodybuilding now, like even just the things that you shared with us. You've been saying, oh, I like CrossFit and I like powerlifting, and now stepping into this new sport and so on. Like if you want to be successful in that sport, and not that there's not to say that you cannot ever dabble in certain things and dip your toes in it and see if you like that identity or not, and just see like, hey, that's something that I tried. But it seemed like that was something that you yourself were also struggling with, like a little bit, in the sense of, I don't know if that's me or if that's important enough to me, type of thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's as you expressed when you were thinking about doing bodybuilding, and like Mike, I'm sure can also attest to this. It demands a great amount of sacrifice, and you do almost have to wear that identity. You have to, and there's certain behaviors and things that have to go with that. And you can make it as restrictive as you want, I suppose. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a competitive bodybuilder, your ultimate goal is to grow muscle, right? And so you have to then weigh up, well, how much do I want that? How much do I want the identity of being a successful competitive bodybuilder vs, just a hybrid athlete or just enjoying yourself, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, it would have probably been, or it might have been even easier for you, or like a different thing. Let's just assume your partner or wife, I don't know. Let's just say she would be that would be her sport and she would love it. And like after a while, you were like, okay, I'll give that a try also. Your decision now to continue next year might look different or not. I don't know. But if
Mm,
all your like obviously some of your friends are bodybuilders, but like if all the people in your environment were like loving that sport and just talking about it all day long, like people talk about soccer or football on TV, it might be different. We don't know, but it might be.
yeah. No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's that um, congruence or lack thereof with what you already identify as and how you already sort of live your life. But yeah, the people I associate with and see, and my friends, etc., as a doctor, uh, it doesn't align at all, because actually, I've said this before. I think bodybuilding to me, when I state it, what is bodybuilding? Okay, you're going to go through a prolonged period of sacrificing quite a lot to try and gain a very small amount of muscle and a lot of fat and probably some health detriments. And then you're going to go through a period of voluntary semi-starvation in order and an extreme diet and lifestyle to try and hold on to that tiny bit of muscle so that you can get really, really shredded and then go and show your muscles off, oiled up to a bunch of other dudes.
It is
That's
it is an
bodybuilding,
ex it
right?
is an extreme sport, and for some reason it sounds
Yeah.
stranger to us, I believe, than let's just say if someone were to be a boxer, which is also a very
Yeah.
unhealthy sport, right? You get hits to the
Yeah.
head and blah blah. It's one posture and so on. But somehow when you tell people that, because it also includes weight restriction, weight manipulation, but when you tell people that, they take that very differently than if you say, I'm gonna starve myself for a bodybuilding competition. And for me, I think that some people like in the health space, they might also struggle with that. But like for me, the health aspect, that was one of the big points where I was like, I've been working for so many years to like improve my hormonal profile. I'm teaching all these things about like health and blah blah blah. And then clearly something that's so yeah, unhealthy. And you can say that about all high performance sports, but again with other things like people that train for the Olympics, that's not really healthy either, but it looks
Mm.
healthy to people. It looks
Yeah.
healthier than someone in the last few weeks before a show. So it's super strange that we have that perception.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's just, yeah. I guess bringing it back around. I suppose that brings you to sort of motivational interviewing and that slow and steady process of helping people to build in the habits that they want, so that it's not a conscious process of changing your identity. It just happens a bit at a time. Um, and I guess that's the only real way to do it. There's some extreme cases where people will just say, I'm not going to do this anymore, and they become a different person overnight. But for the most part, that doesn't work.
Very, very true, very true. Yeah, and we talked about this and how interesting I thought that for you, Joyce, that was the case that where you were just like, I'm sick of this old me. I'm gonna be a new me, and that's very, very impressive. I've met very few people that really managed to do that and to pull that through for sure. And I think you mentioned a great point of like how to guide our clients there in a soft way. I think obviously some other points that I um thought of was like I mentioned earlier, just really keeping your ears open for how they talk about themselves and like what sort of verbiage they're using, and then being like, okay, you say like, oh, I always gain weight over the holidays, or that's just my family, we always overindulge and go over the top, and I can never say no to like blah 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 blah. Yeah, that should make us listen and be like, okay, how can we reframe that? Is there really any truth to what you're saying? Can you change that over time so that even just by the way that you talk, you take on a new identity per se, or yeah, encourage them to seek out that desired environment a little bit more. It doesn't need to be like a drastic change, but often even just having a friend doing the journey with them alongside in the same friend group, even if there's 10 other people, but if you're 2 people against 10, it still feels easier than if you're the only person within that group of 10. So that's something that I've definitely seen a big difference with, or if they get their partner to do that change with them along the way or something like that. So yeah, do you guys have any other suggestions in the sense of how to guide your clients in a smooth way towards identity change?
I think one thought that popped into my head is that with the time that we're living in at the moment, actually social media can be leveraged in a really positive way, in
Sure.
the sense that you can create a positive community. So, choosing to follow people that you want to look like or be like, or choosing people who are on a similar journey to you, creating, messaging those people, joining Facebook groups, and, so that can become your community and that can be your support. And I think that could be, I think now, these days, that could be a really powerful tool for helping keeping people on track. And if they're struggling with their family or whatever, it's like they can lean a lot more on that, which I think is useful.
Yeah, I love that actually, because I mean it's sort of having more and more visual reminders of like that future identity that you're craving or to be or wanting to be. That's such a good point. Like whether that's on social media or I used to be a big fan of having like sticky notes everywhere to remind you of who you want to be, or even screensavers or home screen or whatever. Like the more visual reminders over the course of the day that we can have of like, oh, who am I aspiring to be to break out of where I currently am. That's such a good point, actually. I like that. Any others? Joyce, you haven't said much in regards to this topic. Any thoughts?
No, I mean, honestly, I started reading this and I'm kind of like Tom. It was kind of like, actually, I was like, okay, I cannot get into this. This is not shooting anything out to me. No offense, but just couldn't get into it. But
No,
anyway,
that's not fair.
but most of the time when I hear y'all talk, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense or that makes sense. But
Good.
I agree with everybody. I agree. Tom was talking about, you got to change your identity, and that is the truth. I mean, just like you were saying, that's what I had to do. There was many times that after I lost the weight, I would look in the mirror, but I'd still see that overweight woman constantly. So it was very hard to lose that, to get rid of that person. And so that was a struggle. So I had to do it. I overcome that. Don't want to be that person again. Will never be that person again. Hopefully,
No, you
unless
will not.
yeah, I mean, come a long way. So you're right. You have to change your identity, and you got to, some people, I believe that some people are a little bit stronger than others. I
for
think
sure.
you have to get a mindset too.
No,
To
that's such a good point because well, first of all, I think naturally some people are stronger than others. So like but also I think that confidence grows over time. So once you prove to yourself, hey, it's actually okay if I say to my grandma, hey, after 2 helpings, it's fine. I don't need a third one. And she's gonna get over it. She might be upset for a couple of days, but she's gonna get over it. Next time it feels easier and then easier. So you learn how to say no more often or how to be, okay, just making decisions on your own. But that's a really, really good point. And yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear like 2, 3 food identities that you think of yourself as. So, I mean, I can even just like off the top of my head, you're American, you are a grandma. So all these are sort of food identities, but does something else come to mind?
I can't think of anything right off the hand that would
But
come.
yeah, I mean, I would say that you'd probably think of yourself as a healthy eater for the most part, right?
Yes, because a lot of grandmas are more about pushing eating more, or eat
Yes,
this degree, or they're always baking and things like that. So I'm not one of those that do that. I don't. I'm always trying to do healthier options,
cool.
are pushing healthier options, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, it's and it's hard to let go of that as a grandmother or even a mother, because I see my grandson eating stuff that's not good for him, but it drives me crazy, and it's very, very hard for me to stop and not say anything. And
Mm.
even with, you know, even with my family in general, period, you know, it's just hard for me not to. And I've got to think about, okay, well, what if they were, well, which people have, telling me or asking me, why are you eating that? Why are you eating that? Why don't you eat this? You know, because that's happened to me, and I'm like, okay, please don't say nothing to me. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. So I have to keep an account that that can go both ways. So,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, I kind of chill out with that, I guess I'd say. But yeah, I don't, you know, I mean, you know, like I've had people, I'd be at a wedding. One person said, why are you eating that? You're at a wedding. I'm like, because this is what I want to eat. You know, really, I wanted to say, why don't you just shut up? But, you know, I didn't say that, but, you know, because I'm pretty much blunt about a lot of things, but I didn't say that, of course. But yeah, so, you know, it is hard to, you know, to you change your identity and become someone else, basically, I guess, than what you grew up to be or used to be, that sort of thing. But yeah, yeah, I'm not the grandma that makes all the baked goodies. It's mostly healthy. And then you
That's
got people,
good though.
well, I don't like that if it's not loaded with lots of sugar. And I'm like, well, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit.
Well, and I guess another identity you mentioned earlier, you know, you're known for being strong, and I'm sure your grandson knows you as the active grandma. You know, like he probably brags with that as well, I could imagine. But I was gonna say that I think because you and we've spoken about empathy and how hard we often have of a time of like putting ourselves in other people's shoes and just thinking like, why don't you just do it? It's not that hard, right?
Yeah,
And but
exactly.
I think thinking of the identity thing can sometimes be helpful if we're like, okay, they're so deeply in that family setting, or I'm Indian, or whatever, that's just the way that I eat, that's part of my culture, or even religiously or whatever. um that can sometimes be helpful if we think of those identities a little bit more, and how hard it can be for some people to break out of that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's always easy for us to say, well, it's easy if they've never done it, you know. And I do tell people, I said, you know, it's not really easy. You gotta be patient. You gotta have some discipline. You gotta have a right mindset for it. You gotta,
Exactly.
you know, so it just takes time, you
That's it.
know. Yeah, it's hard. So it almost drives me crazy. But I keep in mind, and I always keep in mind that you used to tell me, if it's upsetting you and you care more about it than they do, then you need to stop.
Yeah.
So I keep that in mind a lot. Okay, that's how, you know, kind of like with my husband, you know, I'm like, okay, just what it is, give it up, you know. I've
That's,
tried and tried and nothing else I can do. So, but he says when he retires, he's gonna work out and stuff. So we will see.
there we go.
Hopefully he will. So that will be next year. So, you know, we'll
Perfect.
see we'll see how that goes. So
Good. Mike, you
yeah.
were gonna say something, or not? Did you raise?
Yeah. It was just, I think another important point is sometimes people, sorry, I can't think of the way to word this. They kind of discount it. They don't know it's possible until they actually do a little bit of it, or they taste a little bit of it. And the example that I can think of is in training. Sometimes you might see someone who maybe just gives up, and you know that they can do like 4 or 5 more reps, and you're like, why didn't you do more? And you're like, oh, I couldn't do it. And like, well, why don't you just go there? Why don't you just try? What's the worst that can happen? And then they do it, and then they're like, oh, I was actually okay. I actually
Uh-huh.
did it. I lifted that weight. Or, I was like, pull up, just an example of like pull ups, like, oh, I can't do a pull up, and it's like they try and they do it, and they're like, oh, I can do a pull up, it's
Yeah.
possible, it's possible. And then they start to change. And I think it's like,
That's a
there's a
good
bit
point.
of, yeah, there's a bit of that involved as well, I think.
I totally agree. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. This was a nice discussion. Any last thoughts?
I like they talk a lot about migration because I have migrated to several countries in my life and how that changes your identity. And you can either go against the place or try to integrate or try to do a mixture, which is what most of the people that I know does, is like you still keep some dishes from your home country, but you adapt to, well, we are in Germany, so we don't have plátanos, so no plátanos. So I also like that. And I also liked the chosen identity part. It's like there are these identities that you decide that you want to have. And I could reflect on myself because I am not that person that, oh yeah, I've been doing sports all my life. No, no, not at all. Absolutely not. This is 2020 thing. So it's 4 years ago. And it helped me to explore how my identities have changed and evolved during that time and how it changes how I dress, what I eat, what I cook, and what I have learned and what I have chosen to eat and how I choose to travel when I do. So it was a paper that I liked and it made me think about the complexities of this. And it's just not like, yeah, just move more and eat less. We're talking about people that lives in communities and they have a cultural baggage that we have to take in account when we want to do a change. And that is really complex.
Yes.
I don't know how to do it, but I know that it's important that at least I think about it when I think on helping someone. Like, where are you? What is your family like? What do you have access to? So more than the scientific cold facts is who are you and how can I help you understanding where you are. And I did find the drawing because
cool.
that I did the last time. I don't know if you can actually see it.
Oh yeah, you did send it to me.
And I don't remember is it in Spanish, English? It's a mixture actually. No, it's in Spanish. But I made some drawings, and it was one day that I was thinking I sent it to Lisa. So I'm a woman, I'm a scientist, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a dancer, I'm a cook,
That's awesome.
and I'm a chef.
I love it.
And I'm also a woman.
Yes. I love all of it. No,
So
I
yeah,
even between well, I haven't spoken to you, Tom, that much, but even with the three of you guys, I cannot think of times where you've told me about a food that you like that's part of your culture. So Mike, you told me about hot cross buns, for instance, and I remember vividly like how much your voice lit up when you just talked about hot cross buns and oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. And of course, Melissa, you were talking about some sort of tostada or I don't even know, but something Latin American for sure. Also, Joyce, with you, I only remember you lighting up about tiramisu or a good piece of steak, but still that's part of, you might not be Italian, but nonetheless, it's like it's part of our culture and we like it, you light up as you think of your grandma or a special moment or whatever. So yeah, it's all part of us. So
so
beautiful.
we cannot cut it. We need to be able to make that part of a sustainable life.
Exactly. Well said. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys.
Just to add, if it's okay, I know it's
Please.
time, so I'll be
No.
very short. But I just wanted to say, just to go back to what you said, Joyce, about some are stronger than others, and I just wanted to add a bit of a caveat, or at least my opinion to that, which was that I think some of us are stronger than others at specific times, and that varies a great deal.
Very true.
And again, that combines with the complexities of human life and being who we are. And,
Right.
and so I often find myself saying to patients, just the other day, someone was talking about trying to lose weight and crying their eyes out and all the rest. And they'd actually lost some weight. They'd done really well, but they just hadn't lost what they thought they should have done. And it's something I always say: give yourself space, give yourself compassion. But it's Steve, my coach and from Revive Stronger. He always says, give yourself grace, which I prefer, to be honest. And I find myself saying it a lot because actually, just sometimes just giving people that permission to not live up to the social media bubbles that they create. Because you're right, Mike, it can be positive, but it can also be a bit of a sal of our own creating, you know. They can't live up to that. So actually just giving them the permission to accept that actually you're not going to look like that bloke who's a professional athlete or is taking stuff or whatever, you know, it's okay. And yeah, and I find myself saying that to I've got a few people I'm sort of getting to grips coaching with. I can't call them clients because I'm not really coaching properly yet. But yeah, and I've said the same thing to them. Yeah, just a little.
Yeah, I like it. I hope you say that to yourself sometimes too. I think we all need to hear that sometimes.
Yeah, I'm working on that one.
As are we all, yes, I think.
Work in progress, work in progress.
That's right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. This was fun. I hope you have a nice evening or rest of your day. Speak to you soon. Bye.
See you later.
Cheers all.